by my colleague Dr. David Wachenfeld, Chief Scientist of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, and we're here to give you a brief update today on the summer reef health and leading into summer. Today, I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the Great Barrier Reef. Here in Townsville, North Queensland, the traditional owners being the Woolgaroo, Kabar and Bindal people, but also to all traditional owners along the length and breadth of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park and World Heritage Area. Pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So Dr. Dave, this is a big time of the year for the reef. We're leading into
busy time on the Great Barrier Reef. In some ways that's a good thing, and in other ways not always such a good thing. So the exciting part of summer on the reef is that it is the season for coral spawning. So corals obviously are animals that live stuck to the seabed. They can't wander around and find a mate, but what they do is they release eggs and sperm into the water. Fertilization occurs in the water, and then those eggs travel off with the currents and eventually settle down somewhere else to make a new coral. Now, on the Great Barrier Reef, the corals synchronize their spawning for a few days after the full moon, and we're actually expecting that the big spawning this year will be in about a week's time, the full moon that we're just about to have. Now, coral spawning is incredibly important. There are billions and billions of eggs produced, and they lead to the next generation of corals. So they are an absolute critical part of recovery processes on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, the other side of summer is, of course, that this is the season where we get extreme weather on the Great Barrier Reef. So if we're going to get floods or cyclones or marine heat waves, then we're going to see them during the summer months. And as a general trend, what we're seeing with climate change is that extreme weather events are becoming more extreme than they were in the past, particularly heat waves. So summer on the Great Barrier Reef is a really exciting time. The big spawning, that big resilience push and the recovery of the reef, but at the same time it's a period of risk from extreme weather events.
Now, do you mind if I call you Dr. Dave?
I'm used to it by now,
okay,
Fred, thank you.
Can you tell us this summer La Nina?
We brought together experts on the Great Barrier Reef, together with climate scientists, so scientists from the Australian Institute of Marine Science, the Biology and James Cook University, to name a few. And we looked over the forecasts for the coming summer. Now, at the moment, the Bureau of Meteorology have declared that we are in a La Nina event, and people may have heard of El Nino before. La Nina is sort of the twin of El Nino. Typically, in a La Nina season, what we see is cooler than average temperatures in this part of the world, together with higher than average rainfall and also a higher than average number of cyclones. Now, typically in this part of the world, we'd expect to see an average of 4 cyclones in a given year, so we're expecting a bit more than that this year. Really importantly, what La Nina doesn't tell us is about where and when those cyclones will form, what track they'll take, or how big and intense they will be. So while we're expecting a larger than average number, there's still a lot of uncertainty about exactly the nature of the cyclone activity that we're going to see over the next few months as we move into summer.
So, Dr. Looking into the next couple of months, I know these things are a bit hard to predict in long-term perspectives, but the next couple of months, what do you think we're in for?
The Bureau of Meteorology runs and temperature forecasting models, and they're running those up to 4 months, 5 months ahead. But it's the next month or two where we in particular what we're looking at over so December and January is 3 things. We're expecting that the coast of the Great Barrier Reef will be warmer than average. We're expecting that the water of the Great Barrier Reef will be warmer than average. And we are expecting higher than average rainfall. So those 3 things over the next couple of months are reasonably solid in their forecasts. But as we look further into summer, there's really a lot of uncertainty, particularly around the timing and the placement of the formation of cyclones. And that is really critical for what's going to happen over the Great Barrier Reef over the coming summer. And so, as we often say at this time of year, yes, we do have some forecasts of what we're expecting, but we really have to closely watch the actual development of local weather patterns. It's the timing of the formation of the monsoon, the cloud cover, the rain, the timing of any formation of cyclones that will really drive exactly what we see on the Great Barrier Reef over the coming summer.
Reef, massive place, the marine park. You have about 70 million football fields worth of space, big as Italy, those sorts of comparisons. How do we monitor a place as large as the Great Barrier Reef?
That's a great question, Fred, and it is a huge challenge. So at about 348,000 square kilometres, the Great Barrier Reef World Heritage Area is bigger than about 2/3 of the country. And keeping an eye on such an enormous ecosystem is certainly a huge challenge. One of the ways that we do that is using satellites, and satellites can help us track weather such as cyclones, but also track the surface temperature of the ocean, so tracking marine heat waves. And obviously satellites can cover a huge amount of ground in a very short time. Sometimes we also use planes, so when a marine heat wave causes a coral bleaching event, that tends to be very easily visible from the air, and we use light aircraft and helicopters to do surveys of coral bleaching. Of course, we also use people out in the water. Scientists, marine park rangers, master reef guides, tour operators are all out there helping us to keep an eye on the Great Barrier Reef. And in fact, anybody who visits the Great Barrier Reef can help us out with that. We have an app, you can download it for Android or Apple devices, and that Eye on the Reef app allows anybody who comes and visits us here on the Great Barrier Reef to report their sightings. You might see a whale, a turtle, you might see something concerning like coral bleaching, but you can tell us what you see out there on the Great Barrier Reef on this enormous and vast ecosystem.
So those geo-referenced photographs that people can see of the things that they're seeing out on the Great Barrier Reef, loading them up through the Eye on the Reef app is really situational awareness and our understanding of what's actually happening out on the Great Barrier Reef at any given time. Dr. Dave, we have a tagline that's called #LoveTheReef. How can others love the reef, or how can others help to protect the Great Barrier
Reef? Fred, obviously there's a lot of travel restrictions because of COVID-19. Starting to lift, and I think everybody knows that the Great Barrier Reef has had a rough time in recent years, and what we've seen is some pretty serious impacts, for example, from coral bleaching events. But at the same time, the reef is still a vibrant, diverse, beautiful ecosystem, and as people can travel, we really encourage people to come and have a look at the Great Barrier Reef, because our experience is that if people come and see the reef, they fall in love with it, and they want to be part of the global move to protect the reef, both by doing everything we can about climate change, but also about the local things like protecting our marine park, improving water quality, and improving our fisheries. So there's a lot of things that people can do. We encourage people to come and have a visit and become part of the team of people working to protect the Great Barrier Reef.
health in the media of late, and from all areas, people making commentary about health of the Great Barrier Reef. Dave, you're an avid scuba underwater photographer, pretty good. Give us your appraisal of the reef health at this point in time.
Look, Fred, there's no question that when you dive on the reef, you can go to places where you can see reef has been bleached and there's a lot of coral. You can see places where cyclones have had big impacts and there's lots of broken and smashed coral. As we said before, the Great Barrier Reef is 348,000 square kilometres. It's bigger than the countries on the planet, and there is a lot of variability out there. So the reef has suffered in recent years, particularly from extreme weather events, and that has caused problems. But at the same time, there is much of the reef that is still amazingly beautiful, undamaged in recent times by these weather events. And there are lots of places where you can have amazing experiences with whales, with turtles, with dolphins. You can see beautiful coral and beautiful fish and healthy coral reef. So there's a very mixed bag of reef health out there at the moment. And obviously, if you come to the Great Barrier Reef, you will almost invariably be seeing the reef with a tourism operator. And we would encourage people to go out with a high standard tourism operator. These people are ecotourism accredited to achieve the highest possible standards of sustainability. And that way, you not only get to learn about the reef, you have an amazing experience and part of that global move to help the Great Barrier Reef.
Well, thanks, Dr. David, for speaking with you today about summer. And please just put your questions in the comments section, and the team here at the Marine Park Authority will follow up with you. So today, thank you. Next, another LinkedIn Live.